Welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further in hopes that it becomes helpful for you in your life and your faith. My name is Jeremy, and I am sitting here with Shane Norcross and Buck Ebelhouse. And as always, before we jump in and I introduce these two guys who you might have heard from quite a bit beforehand, just make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube or if you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, so you can stay up to date on all new content coming out from North Point. But that being said, Shane, Buck, how y'all doing?
I'm doing great. I'm a little tired today, but I'm excited to be here.
Mm-hmm. And I'm excited because Shane's here. So I'm doing fantastic that I get to sit next to this guy.
Full of energy.
Gosh. Yeah. What word did you use earlier? Sweet?
Sweet and smooth.
Yeah.
Sweet and smooth voice. That's what you said.
Yeah. It's that Dr. Pepper guy that I referenced. What's his name? Sweetness?
The really small guy?
The little guy.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not inferring anything. But do you remember the guy's name? Dr. Pepper? Sweet. Something. I don't know. Anyways,
Blanking.
Let's just call him Sweetness.
All right. Call Shane Sweetness.
I don't know. I feel like you just said that.
That's going to stick for sure.
Yeah. We're 3 seconds into this podcast and you're already making fun of me.
Hey, it's just love.
It's just love.
All right. So Shane, Sweetness, tell us a little bit about you really quick. I know you've been on the podcast before, but it's been a minute, and you're on stage every now and then too. But tell us a little about who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
And man, it's always hard to answer the question, who are you? Like, where do you start? So I'm a Canadian stuck in Texas, not looking forward to the next 3 months of this year because this is just the worst part of the year for me. Everything inside me just screams, get out of here. And I just want to embrace the air conditioning and hold on to it for as long as I can. My wife and Elaine and I, we've been married for almost 22 years. Did we get married the same year you did?
99?
Yeah. So
wow, I was 5 in 99. If that makes y'all feel good.
Feeling good now.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
My wife, we have 6 kids, 5 boys and a wonderful girl. Pray for her boyfriends when that day comes, because those boys are going to tear him apart.
That's awesome.
And life right now is just all about keeping up with them. The kids keep me quite busy, distracted. They keep me poor. They keep me tired. And they keep me wondering if I'm doing this parenting thing right all the time.
Yeah, that's good. I just had a realization. We are doing a podcast where we're talking about this past week's message called The Gift of Clarity for Men. Yeah. And I'm sitting across 2 men who have multiplied to 5 other men in their life. Like you guys both have 5 sons.
Yes.
How does that, that's insane.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're just looking at me with these blank stares, like you don't know what to do.
It's because we have 5 sons, the blank stare.
Yeah.
You know what's wild is we knew each other before we had kiddos. And then Shane and Elena got pregnant with Jonah first, and then Sam right behind. And then we were just
back and forth.
Yeah, just son after son after son.
And was it like, hey, Shane, did you guys find? Oh, it's a boy. Oh, Buck, did you find? Oh, it's a boy. And just boy. And by the 5th one, just, it's boys.
Yeah. No, I'm just curious to know what our 10 boys, as they grow up, the impact that they're going to have on the world.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's kind of scary to think about.
That feels like a 2-sided coin. One side feels really good, like, man, I'm excited. The other side, I'm like, we'll see.
All right, cool. Let's jump in. We did do a message called The Gift of Clarity for Men, and it was Father's Day, and so happy belated Father's Day to you guys.
Thank you. And likewise.
Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And son on the way, which I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Because we talked about it a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was like, what's it going to be?
I know.
And it's a boy, so I'm sitting across from 10, and I've got 1.
Yeah, together 11.
Yeah, 11. I feel like I can contribute to that. So
thanks for doing that.
Anyway, so we had the message on Sunday, and it was Father's Day, so we did kind of a man message talking about just clearing up the muddy waters in terms of what a man looks like in society. Mm-hmm. And Buck, you talked about these 4 things, which for me personally have been a grid that I've viewed manhood and just the world and day-to-day life for, I don't know, probably a decade now since I first heard you talk about them a long time ago. Mm-hmm. They're so helpful. They're so easy to remember. Mm-hmm. But I want to today take a little bit of a deep dive into these things. And Shane, the reason you're here is not just because you're a great man and we respect you.
Really?
Careful. Don't take that too. Maybe we'll edit that part out.
Right.
No, but honestly, because you lead groups here at North Point, and one of the things I love about groups here at North Point and community is our men's group and our leadership development groups for men, and just seeing what has happened in the lives of men as a result of your leadership, men going through these groups and just seeing the life change and growing as fathers and husbands and growing in their faith. It's absolutely amazing. And so we really wanted to invite you in on that conversation because you have led that, but also been on the other side of so many men just in your time here as groups director. And so I want to jump into this first question, and really it's more of a broad question before we hit the four things individually. And we're going to unpack each of them and talk about how we can apply it to our life. But the first one, oh no, not the first one. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong question. What I want to do is really look at why these four things are important, why we would spend a Sunday and a podcast talking about them. And the question in that whole sentence is basically, what is at stake here as it relates to clearing up the muddy waters to men? Like, why is this even an important conversation in the first place? Why is it necessary? How would y'all answer that?
I mean, I think we live in a world today where there's more confusion than ever around the idea of what it means to be a man. And I think our children, our 10 boys, and my one little girl, are growing up in a world where a lot of people have been hurt by men who have mishandled responsibility, leadership, power. And so what's at stake is our 10 boys, my wife's potential, or my daughter's potential future husband, not knowing what it means to be a man and entering the role of adulthood with a lot of confusion, which I can't imagine how hard that would be for them without that clarity.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. I think, I said it on Sunday, when there's confusion, and I did, an illustration with my car stuff. But when there's confusion, like I'm jamming parts in the car that shouldn't go in the way they should. The car's not starting. It's exploding, backfiring. There's all these things that are going wrong, and it's simply because I was confused. And I think the same thing can apply to a man, like Shane just alluded to. I mean, women feeling disrespected, women feeling like property or like an object, women feeling like they have to carry their keys in a certain way, so just in case a man takes advantage of them. Women have to look over their backs. Families and the sacredness and the value of a family being in jeopardy, the security of sons and daughters growing up, the fabric of our culture. There's so many things at play that one of the gifts and one of the reasons why, I signed up to be a pastor was to bring clarity. Ultimately, to bring clarity about who Jesus is. I really think Jesus experientially, I think practically can change our lives. I've experienced it. I've seen it. I've felt it. In the same way that I want to bring clarity to Jesus, because there's real possibilities with Jesus Christ, in the same way I want to bring clarity with masculinity. To go, hey, it's hard enough getting it right when you have clarity, but if you don't know, man, you're hurting a lot of people and potentially hurting yourself, and you're not discovering your meaning and purpose and significance. You're not, feeling the freedom of that. You're not leaning into what God designs you for. And there's just, it's unnecessary. And so that's why we called it the gift of clarity. It really is a gift for men, for fathers, to experience something that's liberating, to experience something of joy, to experience something that's so empowering, to experience that security, and being able to give that to our sons, being able to give that to our daughters, to give that to our family, to give that to culture. So much of that's at stake. And so, if we can help with that, starting with me, I need a lot of help in all these areas. I just think it's one of the greatest things we could do as a church and talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, when it comes specifically to that last part you just said, why is this so important in the conversation with the church specifically too? As you think about North Point, as you think about just the way people view Christians as a whole, why is this conversation about what it means to be a man important in that realm as well?
Yeah, I just think men have purpose. Men have meaning. Men, just like, again, I don't want to keep going back to cars, but that's just on my mind. The distributor I talked about had a role, had a function. And when it fit its role, man, things like the engine roared. I think the same thing is true with men. I think, and true with women, that we all have very specific roles. And when the roles are working the way God designed those roles to work, it's something beautiful. Something beautiful that happens in the church, where the church feels like the safest place anyone can come, that the church feels like everybody, that people can find hope and meaning and purpose when we're living out and working according to our roles. And the thing is, I say it a lot, it may not be emotionally satisfying, but, in the scriptures, the Bible, like God gave us this, clarity. And sometimes we read things, and I read things that I'm like, oh, emotionally, especially in our culture, that may not be satisfying, or that may go against the things I feel. But if I truly believe God loves me, if I truly believe God is for me, if that's proven through his son, Jesus Christ, then even emotionally, if I don't like some of the things I read, then I have to trust it's for my benefit. I have to trust it's for the benefit of the church. So in the church, I think, as well as in culture, as well as in families, as well as in individuals, providing clarity allows you to experience, design, allows you to experience purpose and meaning, and it allows things to work much, much more effectively than if you're confused about how distributors work in an engine.
Yeah, for sure. So these 4 things you unpacked, we've talked about them a few times, and it's reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and expect a greater reward. Mm-hmm. And what I love about them is how universal they are, because whether somebody's listening and they're a follower of Christ or not, they can apply these in their life. Not only this, but if somebody's listening and they're not a follower of Christ, perhaps they would think about their father or their husband or some men in their life and go, man, I really respect the men that exemplify these things, these 4 things. The first one being reject passivity. Talk about that a little bit. Just, Buck, if you can give us an overview, and then I want to dive into some examples of what reject passivity means and why it's so important and why it's potentially even countercultural to today.
Yeah, the quick overview, I compared the life of Jesus and I compared the life of Adam. And I said passivity is just that thing that, instead of stepping up and stepping in, it's stepping away. Passivity is that thing where we hear that voice, that feeling inside of us. And predominantly it is a feeling that then manifests itself in a voice that says it's too hard, too difficult, too much. I just can't do it. It's just too much. It's that feeling or that voice that says, here's what I feel. I don't feel like doing it. I feel like giving in. I just want to be happy. Doesn't God want me to be happy? And what Adam and Eve said is what we say today in kind of our context. Did God really say? Adam and Eve, God was very clear about the tree. There was no question about it. God's very clear about a lot of things in our culture and in our families and the roles of men and women today, but we want to question it. Did God really say? All of that you could put in the category in the room of passivity. That's passivity, that feeling, that voice, that feeling like, it's too hard, too difficult. That's what we all feel.
Yeah. So how have you guys seen this played out in real life? Examples? What house would you kind of talk through rejecting passivity and what that means?
I think when I try to process what reject passivity looks like in my life, it comes down to 2 words for me. It's take action. And it's not coming up with excuses. Like, those are the 2 things that I think about all the time when I wrestle with passivity. And it's a choice that I have to make over and over again all day long, because it seems like my natural tendency is to fall back towards passivity. And so what that looks like practically in my life today, it's sometimes just in the very small decisions that I make. Like when I get home from work, it's sitting in the car for a moment before I get out and enter the chaos. I just tell myself, hey, what does it look like for me to take action as I walk in this front door, as I'm about to be interrupted by 6 kids, a wife that's been dealing with those 6 kids all day? And how do I reject passivity? And how do I not come up with excuses on why I'm tired and why today was so hard, and recognize what God's called me to as a father and a husband? So sometimes it's just rejecting passivity comes down to the little decisions I make on a daily basis.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Buck.
Yeah, I just think, sometimes in life, having clarity allows you to normalize what you feel and experience. One of the tests of truth is it experientially true? I don't care if you're a God follower, you're not a God follower, you love Jesus, you don't care about Jesus. every person feels passivity. You know, we all feel that. So when we're able to give like clarity and definition and say, this is that feeling, this is that voice, this is that thing that you have felt, I think sometimes it just normalizes it. And sometimes that's pretty powerful in life to be able to go, man, I'm feeling this way. One of the things my counselor's done for me oftentimes is said, Buck, that's normal. You know, I felt weak. I felt confused. I felt like I'm not doing enough or whatever when I feel a certain feeling. And, you know, just hearing the words like, hey, that's normal. You're in a place that, you know, people feel that. And that space is defined. It's helpful. So I think, passivity is not good. But I think sometimes it's like, hey, I need to, you know, take my boys out to lunch. Well, I'm so busy at work, you know, I don't feel like it. You know, or I need to, you know, take Jill on a date, or I need to apologize, or I need to pick up the dishes in the sink because I've walked by them 5 times and I'm like, okay, is Jill going to do this? Is the boys going to, you know, I have opportunity to do that. You know, am I going to get up early and am I going to work out? Am I not going to hit the treadmill? Am I going to hit the treadmill? You know, sometimes when I feel those feelings that are there, or when temptation, like I talked about on Sunday, when that comes my way, sometimes it's empowering to normalize it. It's empowering to identify it, to go, I know who you are.
Yep.
I feel this. That's passivity.
Yep.
And then obviously you're faced with, what are you going to do? And as Shane says, you know, step up. Like, so, but I just think having clarity allows you to know what that feeling is versus saying, you know, one of the dangers, and I've said this before from stage, and I want to be very careful, but feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts. It may be true. You need to ask a lot of questions about those feelings. But today I think we live in a culture where automatically we go, if I feel it, it's true. If I feel it, I must justify it. If I feel it, I must go prove it. And I think this is one of those things to go, okay, well, let's talk about those feelings. I mean, those feelings are coming from somewhere. Where are they coming from? Let's talk about those. But that feeling of passivity, which gets mixed in all of that, can really keep us from enjoying that freedom, enjoying meaning, enjoying purpose, you know, replenishing relationships, feeling alive as a man, and just knowing every man's going to feel that feeling is sometimes just normalizing and powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like kind of combining the two things y'all said. You know, you said take action, and you said recognizing that feelings aren't facts. You put those two together, and that really helps you reject passivity, because in those moments when you're sitting on the couch, or those moments when you're in the car, or those moments when you walk by the dishes, it's like, okay, feelings aren't facts. I don't feel like doing this. But the fact is, like, I've been called by God to be a husband, to love my wife as Christ loved the church, to lead and love my kids well. Therefore, I will take action. And sometimes I think just very practically, sometimes like just the small pieces of getting moving can create this momentum of actually like getting the things done we want to get done, you know, just doing the first cup in the dishes. And then it's like, it just kind of goes from there, and you kind of compound these wins, and it feels good as a man to like reject passivity and just like be a man and go after it, you know?
Yeah. Well, you can ask questions about the feelings too. If you know it's passivity and there's a normalization of that, then you can go, well, why is it that I feel this way? You know, where do those feelings come from? I've shared before, like, I didn't feel like talking to Jill about my feelings. Well, why not? You know, where does that come from? Well, I feel like, you know, taking control of everything. Well, where's that come from? You know, and so, again, it just allows you a little bit more, you know, depth to your life, a little bit more clarity to be able to identify those feelings and say, oh, that's passivity. Yep. You know, I feel that. I feel that with God. I don't feel like reading the Bible. I don't feel like praying. I don't feel like, you know, memorizing scripture. I just feel like hanging out and watching TV. So, you know, what is that? Well, that's passivity. Every man feels it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's, you know, we as men, or anybody, we're just so busy all the time that what you say sounds simple, but I think what a lot of us are missing is we just don't take the time to ask the question, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? And actually process the answer. And we're just living our life responding to our emotions, or trying to like push our emotions aside and trying to fake it till we make it. But I think there's so much freedom and encouragement and help that comes when we take the time to ask ourselves the questions, why am I feeling this way? Where is that coming from?
Yeah, and it could be like on that, if I feel like, man, it's too hard, it's too much, I feel overwhelmed. Well, having the freedom to go, well, that feels like passivity. But why is it that I feel that way? Well, I may be giving too much of myself away at work to not have enough margin to give what I need to give to my wife or to my kids. or, you know, and so just what you're saying, Norcross, is that whole idea is to be able to go, hey, let me identify those feelings, pause in those feelings, because I'm not in a rush to validate them. I'm not in a rush to go, I feel it, therefore it's true. I'm in a rush to, well, I wouldn't say a rush, but I'm curious. So I'm just going to be curious about those feelings and know that a lot of that's passivity, and that's very normal for men.
Yep. How would y'all respond to somebody who would ask the question in terms of reject passivity, and then we can move on to the next three? But so often in culture, and I think about movies in Hollywood, like there's one actor in my mind that I can't think of his name, but he's got the big, thick, white mustache. And he's an old dude, and he was just in the Bigfoot. He like killed Hitler and then Bigfoot or something movie or. Oh, I'm blanking.
Killed Hitler and Bigfoot movie.
Yeah, exactly.
All at the same time?
What is his name?
I have no idea what you're talking
I
about.
Cannot. It's gonna really bug me the rest of the day.
Right.
But big old. He's known for his like mustache.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's right there. I can't. Anyways, so he's like the manly man in movies, and anytime you see him, you go, oh man, this dude, he's the guns, and he's works with his hands, and he's on the ranch, and he's doing like, these are all this kind of like cultural portrayals of masculinity and manhood. What y'all are saying is that sometimes rejecting passivity is just doing the dishes, is just going in and being intentional with your kids. Like, how do you differentiate between kind of how culture views manhood and passivity? Because culture tends to view passive men as men who don't know how to work on the car. Men who don't know things that are manly things, right? How would you like kind of talk about that? Sam Elliott. Thank you, Josh. Sam Elliott.
Yeah, Sam Elliott.
Yeah, that's the guy.
it.
Thank
He's
you,
got
Josh.
a deep voice too, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got like, yeah.
Oh yeah, he's on Tombstone, is he not?
Yeah, Tombstone.
Yeah.
I think he's on the Bigfoot movie too, so,
Yeah.
just go there.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that's why I love this grid, and that's why I call it a grid, because you can be. I mean, there's so much diversity in people. There's so much diversity in this world, which is wonderful. We celebrate so much of that because that's what God did. I mean, if He made us all robots that look the same, that'd be crazy. So that's true in masculinity. That's true in femininity. That's true in all arenas of life. And so the beauty is the grid allows all of that to be under it. So meaning like, hey, you can like art and be in the creative realm. You can like outdoors and guns and hunting and all that and be in that realm. I mean, you can be in all these different realms, and it doesn't define you as a man. It doesn't define you as being masculine or not. You can do all of those wonderful things, but regardless if you're more of the creative and, gosh, I love all this thing, or you're more like, creative is not manly, and that's your view, which I would disagree with, and you're more like, hey, I'm just going to work on the car, and dirty hands and wrenches are, manly stuff, then I would say in both of those, they both face passivity. They're both going to feel that feeling, regardless of what culture is saying is more manly than the other. And the question is going to be, regardless of how you feel about those things or what you do, the question is going to be, what are you going to do with that passivity? So the guy with the wrench and the guy with the beer in his hand and working on the car and whatever, if that's your view of masculinity, or that's what culture said is be masculine, you can be far less of a man, more like Adam. And I want to be careful with my words, but, in light of what I said on Sunday, you can take your cues from your masculinity from a guy who had failed masculinity. And someone over here that culture would say is less manly can be one of the strongest, most impressive, most authentic, most genuine men you've ever met. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love the grid, that, it feels like it's way above that discussion.
Sure. That's really good.
I mean, as a father to 5 boys, and I am not a mechanic. Like, there's no part inside of me that wants anything to do under the hood of my car.
But you sound just like Sam Elliott. Shane.
Yes.
I was about to say that.
But,
you put a mustache on you, and I can't tell.
Yeah.
What do you call this thing on my face right now?
Peach fuzz.
But when I had young boys, when I was a young father, I was very intimidated by thinking that I wasn't qualified to be a father or to be a man, because I felt the pressure of, hey, if I'm going to be a real man teaches his son how to pop the hood and do all these things inside a car, and I don't know where to start. And part of me was wrestling with the voices in my head that would tell me you're not qualified. And it wasn't until I truly understood what is it that defines me as a man, and it's what God says about me, period. And it's not about what I like doing or what I don't like doing. It's who God says I am, and out of that I have the freedom to be the father that God's called me to be, because I have clarity around what it means to be a man because of what God is calling me to and who God says I am. And that has brought me a lot of encouragement and peace, and has helped me deal with the voices that say, hey, you're not qualified to be a father because sometimes you don't handle these manly things really well, or because my dad wasn't around when I was a boy, and so he didn't instill those things in me or teach me those things. But that doesn't disqualify me from being a father, from showing my boys what it looks like to be a man.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, and that's where I love what you said, because on Sunday, one of the things I said, clarity provides security. And security to be who God called you to be and be free with that. That's what I love. That's why what you just asked. I mean, there can be 100 expressions of who God made you to be. And they could be very, very different, radically, on the different sides of the spectrum. But that doesn't define whether or not you're a man.
Yeah.
Now, the question that I wrestle with all the time, as my mic goes away from me, is like, how do we instill this desire or this decision to reject passivity in our boys as they grow up? Because I read a stat today that said the average 21-year-old adult would have played 10,000 hours of video games before he turns 21. And just like they're being molded and shaped by this world they're growing up in that does not encourage and inspire them to reject passivity. And how do we overcome that today as dads?
Yeah. I think another part of that is accountability and rejecting passivity is being surrounded by other men with the same values and principles. And in a culture that's lonelier than it's ever been, I was listening to a book, The Comfort Crisis, that you talked about recently, Buck. And I think it talked about in cities, you're 40% more likely to have depression and you're 30% more likely to have anxiety. Like we are closer than we've ever been as just humans, and we're more lonely than we've ever been too. And I think that men in particular, one of the cultural things is like, men, I've got it all figured out. I don't need anybody else to help me. That's kind of a cultural perception, but men sometimes really need other men to partner with them and help them understand what it means to reject passivity.
Sure.
And I'm sure you guys feel that as you're raising sons, hoping that they have a group of guys around them to teach them that or help them with that.
Well, and that's in part why we talked about what we did on Sunday, and it kind of circles back to every day every day a man is being bombarded and told what it means to be a man. And there's so much confusion. It's like what I've described before is when you're at a stop sign and everything's moving, you have nothing solid. And you want to put your foot on the brake because you're like, am I moving? Am I not moving? What's moving around me? Man, it's so confusing. I mean, that's the culture we live in, and that's the culture our boys are grown up in. And so I just think we have an opportunity to provide something stationary. And that's what you do. You want something stationary to go, okay, this is going to give me something solid. And this is why, the conversation on Sunday is so important to go, hey, a definition, clarity is so important in the world that we live in. 10,000, hours being playing games, social media influencing you, every single day. So, and it's bombarding, telling you here's what is a man, here's what's not a man, here's what you should and shouldn't do. If we can enter in that conversation, just say, hey, let's provide some clarity, let's provide something stationary, and then model it. I think that's the greatest thing. What we do teaches our kids far more than what we say. So I think modeling it is really bringing clarity, and then modeling it. It's really important.
Yeah. I think these next three will go a little bit quicker because a lot of them are based on that first one, reject passivity, and it kind of goes from there. The second one is accept responsibility. But can you give a quick overview on that one, and then let's talk about some examples of what that looks like, and maybe even just continue the examples that we've already thought through.
Yeah, on Sunday I said that every man's given three responsibilities: a will to obey, a work to do, and a woman to love. And so will to obey. This is as you open the scriptures, open the Bible, you would say, okay, God's given us a will to obey, God's given us a work to do to provide for our families, and God's given us a woman to love. And that's potentially, if you get married, that would be your wife or your future wife. If you choose not to get married, as the Apostle Paul suggested, hey, it may be better not to get married because that's a whole different thing. I mean, he actually says that in the Bible, which is kind of cool. And he said, basically, if you do that, then what that means, your woman to love is going to be the women around you. It's going to be respect. It's going to be honor. It's going to be elevating the value and the worth and the significance and the dignity and protecting women in our culture. I mean, that's your woman to love. And so that's the responsibilities of every man. And the question becomes, are you going to lean in and step into those responsibility? Or are you going to, reject those as Adam did and step away from those responsibilities?
Yeah. So Shane, in your car example, getting home, what goes through your head in terms of accepting responsibility in those moments?
Something that I think I heard Mark Batterson say this once. It's I don't get to control my circumstances. I have no control over them, and I don't know what they're going to look like, but I get to control my response every single time. He uses this example of, I think it was an Austrian psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl. I don't know how you say that with a German accent.
No, that sounded good.
Yeah.
I feel like you were pretty German there.
Pretty Canadian, but it's fine.
Well, he shares the story of how he was in the Nazi death camp, and he was stripped of everything: his name, his title, his family was taken away, and he was reduced to just a number, prisoner 119104. And his mother, brother, and wife would not survive the death camp. I mean, it was just him. And after his liberation, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in the book, he wrote, everything can be taken away from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. And so I know what my role is as a husband, as a father, as a son, as an employee. And I don't have any control over my circumstances, but one freedom I have is I get to choose my response to those circumstances. And I think Victor was wrong in one thing. There's one other thing that no one can take away from me, and it's knowing that who I am in Christ, and knowing who's with me and who's got my back. And so so accepting responsibility to me is just, I get to choose how I'm going to respond regardless of my circumstances. And that's what a man does.
Yeah. And part of that is looking at what has God put in front of me to be faithful to. And it's wife, it's kids, it's the church, it's, these people in my life or people I'm investing in or women as a whole. And that's kind of accepting responsibility there.
But it's not easy. Why can't it be easier? It's the, that verse that continually, it's so hard to digest, is like, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Like, that second part of that verse, it's like the hardest thing to, what does it look like for me to give myself up for my wife, for my kids, for people I work with, for you two guys when I'm sitting at a table with you?
Yeah, it's and I think the one thing if you're listening or watching, I really want to come across, and I said this on Sunday, but all three of us have failed multiple times and still fail multiple times at this. It just gives us something to go back to.
Yeah.
It gives us something to have hope for, to lean in towards. So I think responsibility is God has spoken. I mean, this could be categorically like a big moral category of like, here's all the things God has said to do and not to do. Thou shalt not, thou shalt, lying and stealing and honoring your father and mother and, so many other things. And so, I think God's been very clear on that. And that feels so empowering when you lean into that. When you're tempted to cross a line, God said, don't cross. And he said not to cross it because he's not trying to make you suffer. He's really trying to give you that incredible feeling of freedom when you accomplish something significant. You step back and you can breathe deep and go, man, that feels good. Yep. He wants you to experience that. And so he put these boundaries in place so that you could feel more liberated, so you could experience more meaning and purpose and significance as a man, more freedom as a man. So responsibility is so many moral choices, so many things God has spoken into, but a woman to love as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I don't want to apologize to Jill. I mean, I said this on Sunday, but the truth is, or, I don't want to lean in and go, okay, let me share a little bit more. I don't want to go discover, Peter said, be gentle. Sometimes I'm hurt and I just want to be, like you said, the one thing I am responsible for is my reactions. I can do something about that, and so, when it comes to Jill and discovering her and saying, hey, what do you think about this? And how would you handle this? And man, I'm struggling with this, being vulnerable with her. So much of that is just speaking love and just learning about her more and more and learning how to love her, learning how to be gentle with her, learning how to love her as Christ loved the church, learning how to submit to her as we're called to mutually submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And that's, clarity of a woman to love. And I think there's such reward. It feels like, man, we're growing closer, experiencing more intimacy, experiencing more richness in our relationship, experiencing more oneness in our relationship. It's a reward that God has for you, but he's given clarity on what to do with a woman to love. And then a work to do, this is just my personal opinion, but for over a decade, I've sat down on the other side of so many men. And when a man steps out of the workforce and doesn't engage and doesn't provide, there's something it does to the soul of a man. And I'm not talking about, man, you lost your job and you're struggling. I mean, that's real and that is so difficult. But part of the soul of a man is designed to go provide for your family. And I don't care if you're a God follower or not, there's something so rewarding. That's why you see people go, agnostic, atheist, there's so much reward in being able to provide that security and provide that strength and provide that foundation and, from work. And that does something to you as a man, for your family, does something for your kids.
Right.
And that's, I would just say, a God-designed thing. I mean, the scriptures say, if you don't provide for your family, you are worse than a person who doesn't believe in Jesus Christ. In other words, like as a follower of Jesus, you should know this. And so those are the responsibilities. And when you lean into those, it's like a grid. It's like a little bit of a map to go, man, I feel so much more alive as a man. And yes, it was hard as hell, but I've leaned in. And I've done what God's called me to do, and I've rejected those feelings of passivity. And morally, or with my wife, or future wife, or in terms of working as if working for the Lord, not for my boss, who I may not like. It's a reward, and it feels really good, and it feels freeing as a man.
Yep. Yeah, but you're right in that most of the moments we don't go, I shall accept responsibility. Most of the times we go, dang it, I gotta accept responsibility again.
Yeah, totally.
We find ourselves in that kind of.
Yeah, or some moments is no, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, I have heard myself say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm hurt, or I don't feel like it, or whatever, and I've walked away.
I'll accept responsibility tomorrow.
Yeah, on Monday.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I'm perfect. Right? I fail every single day. And as men, it is, I know, it's a shock and surprise. I mean, I probably every hour I fail at something.
Sure.
But it's just, I'm constantly reminded that I'm not perfect. And it's hard to not get to a place where you just want to give up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, this grid and the clarity that we have is so important, and just reminding ourselves who we really are. And regardless of what we've done or how badly we failed at this as being a man, it's so important for us to remember that as sons and daughters of Jesus, of our Heavenly Father, there's nothing we can do that would make our Heavenly Father love us less or love us more. His love for us is perfect on our best day or our worst day. And sometimes when I just want to give up because I haven't done a good job rejecting passivity, or I haven't accepted responsibility, and the list is long, I just need to remind myself of who I am and how my Heavenly Father sees me, and then go do something really small that gives me that little sense of accomplishment, like you were saying earlier, Jeremy. Like just start small and build a little bit of momentum towards rejecting passivity and leading courageously and accepting responsibility. But it's so important to remember who you are and how God feels about you.
Yep. One of our friends, Barry, told me once that I think for a while I prayed a lot. Hey, God, give me strength, give me strength, give me strength. And then Barry phrased it one time, and he just said, instead of saying give me, say come be my strength. Come be my strength. And that was eye-opening for me, because as we're thinking about this man convo and knowing we all fall short, we're always going to go, you know what, today I don't want to accept responsibility. Like, we cannot do it on our own. We just cannot. Like, we will fall short every single day. And praying for strength, I think, is amazing. But when we ultimately open up our hands and go, God, come be my strength today. God, I know on my own I will embrace passivity. God, I know on my own I'm not going to accept responsibility. God, would you come be my strength? Because with you, I know that I can do these things. And it's really, and that's where, like, all four of these things going in tandem with our relationship with God as men is so important. I don't know how, for us to really reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, expect a greater reward, like that relationship is so key.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is one of the reasons I love Christianity. And if you're not a Christian, this is one of the reasons why I'd say, man, consider it. It's because failure is common to every man. And it's in the midst of the failure, what is that going to do to you? And a lot of times we can learn from it, a lot of times, but there's many times in this conversation to where you can feel like a failure. You can feel like, oh, I'm never going to get it right. You can feel like, okay, I'm just going to give up now. I mean, I've tried. And one of the beauties of Christianity is Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. Jesus says, like, in terms of forgiveness, like on the cross, he said, it's finished. Like, all of your sins, past, present, future, what God has called you to do, when you miss that mark and you don't do what he's called you to do, and you know what you should do. you don't have to go take that for yourself and go wrestle it out or go drink it out or go do whatever it out. You can actually bring that to Christ, and Christ says, man, you are redeemed. You are forgiven. My mercies are new every single morning. You are washed white as snow. Get up. Today I'm going to be your strength. I'm going to be your power. And that relationship, to be able to take my failure somewhere instead of keep heaving it on me and feeling worse and worse about me, and put that on Jesus and say, Jesus, that's why you had to die for me because I missed the mark, is so freeing and empowering to wake up the next day and to have a grid of clarity and to say, okay, today is a new day. Today I'm wonderfully and fearfully made. Today God's given me everything I need for this day. Okay, God, here we go again. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it gives you hope. It gives you reason to keep going. Yeah. So one of the reasons I love Christianity is knowing I'm forgiven.
Yep. One of the reasons.
Yeah.
Yep. I love when you make comments like that as our pastor.
Yeah. What's that?
Just like, Christianity's great.
I like it.
It is. Yeah. I mean, well, of course. I mean,
I'm glad you know you're forgiven.
Yeah. I mean, conversely saying, Christianity sucks.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, that'd be
fair enough.
I mean, yeah.
Fair enough.
But I mean, yeah, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Let's jump into this third and fourth one. So we've talked about rejecting passivity, accepting responsibility. The third one is lead courageously. Quick overview on that, and let's talk about what that means.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you define courage and define, define what a coward, and those are the two terms I used. So, I mean, we all feel that. That's the angst. That's the moment. That's the pivotal. You know, what are you going to do? Go left, go right. What are you going to do in this moment? I mean, it's all there. You're feeling the feelings. You know what to do. You know what God has spoken. What are you going to do? Step in and be courageous in your leadership, or step back as Adam did. And that is a cowardly act of leadership. Mm-hmm. And both of those have, you know, the ripple effect. There's a consequence. And so I just think the knowledge is powerful, knowing, okay, this is my moment. You know, I've talked about it before, but in 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, no temptation has seized you except what's common to man, and God is faithful. He will provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. It's like that moment. That moment you know God has spoken. That moment you know here's your way out. That moment you know you could walk away. That moment. And what are you going to do in that moment? And so every man is faced with that moment. That could be hourly, that could be daily, that could be weekly. And it's, what are you going to do in that moment? Coward courage. And just knowing, okay, I'm going to step into who God created me to be, and I want to feel that sense of freedom. I want to feel that sense of meaning and purpose as a man. Today I'm going to choose, through your strength, Christ, to step in and be courageous in my leadership.
Yeah. Shane, how have you experienced this?
This one's tough for me because I'm a people pleaser, and so I'm afraid to rock the boat. I want to make everyone happy, and so leading courageously is easy until it pushes up against other people. Yeah, that's right, and then it's not very courageous. But I think what helps me, it goes back to clarity. Like, I can't lead people, I can't lead my family, I can't lead my wife or my kids if I don't know where I want to take them. That's why I think having a clear vision on where I want to lead people or where I want to lead my family and clear values is so incredibly important. Because when I get caught up in the, hey, am I leading courageously today or not, I ask myself that question, well, where do I want to go? Where do I want to take them? Where do I want to lead them? And ultimately, I really want to lead them to Jesus, because the freedom he brings me is fantastic, and I want them to experience the same thing. So when I wrestle with leading courageously, I ask myself, where am I going? And where do I want to take them?
Yeah.
It's like going on a vacation but not having a destination. It's like, hey, let's go get in the car. We're going to go on vacation today. Well, where are we going? Well, I don't know. Well, how do you lead someone courageously if you don't know where you're taking them?
Yep. Yeah, I heard John Acuff says it's like playing golf in the dark.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you got a hole really far away.
They do have night golf, though.
With no lights or anything.
Yeah, that would be...
Yeah.
Exactly, though. It totally makes sense, except I'm probably better at golf in the dark than I am in the lights.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, as long as I hit the ball, it's a win.
Yeah.
I think one component of leading courageously, I think you said it early on, but like fear, afraid. You used the word afraid, and fear is the big thing. And the thing that gets over fear is just exposing the fear and really just kind of trusting God with whatever we're afraid of. And so often men, we're afraid of not measuring up. We're afraid of not being enough. We're afraid of not looking like a man, you know? And so often it's just going, you know what, I'm going to take action. I'm going to lead courageously because I know my destination. I know where I want to go. And that gives me courage. And hey, God, come be my strength as I try to lead courageously and try to discover what this means. But oftentimes it is, it is exposing fears. I think Mark Batterson says that when we're born, we only have two fears. I might get these wrong. I think it's two fears of loud noises and falling. Those are our only two fears. That I might have those wrong. One of them, I need to go back and look at my notes, but he has it in one of his books. I think it's called In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. And which is the longest book title in the world. But he says, so you have two fears, loud noises and the fear of falling. And every other fear after that is learned throughout your life. And I think so often leading courageously, one of the biggest inhibitors of this is the fears we've learned that we've got to expose. We've got to trust God with those things. And we've got to lead courageously in the midst of those and ask God for strength in the process. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you accuse me of the whole pastor comment, which is totally fine because that's who I am.
Let me guess, you love Jesus.
But yeah, I love Jesus, and this is, again, one of the reasons why I love Christianity is because there is such security to empower you to be courageous when you know that perfect love drives out fear, that I am perfectly loved. Like, I'm already secure. I'm already enough. I've already arrived. Like, I'm already forgiven. And when you know that, when you genuinely know that, and just don't say it. I mean, just saying it's helpful and it can kind of lead you there. But when you know it and you know who you are as a man and you know that your purpose and meaning and you know your identity and you know that you're perfectly loved by a God who created all things and he sees you and he knows your name and he knows every hair on your head, then you can go, okay, I can step up. And, if there's an injustice, I can step up in that. If there's something in my home that I don't feel like, sharing my emotions with Jill, I mean, I keep going back to that, but that's one of my big struggles. I can go, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable in this moment. You can have the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to go first and own my piece of the pie and say, son, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Or, sweetie, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that. That's my brokenness. It's not you. It's not your fault. To give you the courage to say things perhaps your father never said or that was never modeled to you, is to know that God is with you, to know that you are perfectly loved by a Savior. And that is so dang empowering to allow you to step into the shoes of courage.
Yep.
When you think about leading courageously, you think about the man going into battle, strong, tough, but like the things that you talk about, like being first to empathy, being first to humility, being first to asking for forgiveness, like those things are sometimes the hardest things that we can do, but there are no better ways that we can show our boys, our children, others what it looks like to lead courageously when we do those things.
Well, so much, even in our culture today, so many different opinions. Who's going to be the first one to be curious and ask the question? Hey, I totally don't agree with what you're saying. You wouldn't say that. But, hey, I'm curious. Tell me more about that. When did you first hear that? Like, when did you learn that? Hey, tell me more about your story. And who's going to be the first one to be courageous enough, to be curious enough about the life on the other side of them? And again, that's when you know who you are and you have that kind of confidence, and somebody says something offensive to what you said earlier, Shane, your response, their response reveals the character in them, but your response to what they did reveals the character in you. And so the ability to not respond and likewise to not like react, but to be able to respond, take some time, invite God into that, and then come into that in a way that Christ has called you to, that requires an enormous amount of courage, because I just want to pay back. I want to hurt you if you hurt me, all those kind of things. To do what Christ called you to do, I mean, that security is so powerful to be courageous.
Yep. Yeah, but as y'all are both talking, sitting across from you going like, okay, 10 sons, I've got my one son on the way. And as I'm personally thinking about my own life and how these relate to me, there is so much fear. Like, as I think about having, and what kind of dad am I going to be? And, what about this? And what about this? And what if this happens? And how am I going to know how to, golly, the birds and the bees stock? That's like years away, but I know it's going to be here so soon.
It's a conversation, not a talk.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
Lots of conversations, not one
I just
conversation.
had that with one of my youngest, and he's like, Dad, no. And I'm like, yeah. And well, like, here we go. And I'm like, it's a conversation for years to come, not one talk.
Yeah. Semantics.
Sure. Yeah,
I'm with you. But hearing you guys talk about perfect love drives out fear. Like, I think the only way I can lead courageously, even in the midst of all these things, is just to go, God, I know that your perfect love is for me and is for my son. And I know I'm going to mess up drastically, but your love is perfect, and you're going to love him in ways that I just can't. And like Shane said, like, my greatest hope is that he would just know Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and the beauty is, if you have courage, you can ask for help.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, so many mistakes I've made. Good Lord, you can learn a ton from my mistakes because I've made so many of them. And so that's the beauty, is to go like, I don't have to figure it all out. God's big enough. He can handle all this. And therefore I can go and say, hey, you can, hey, can you help me with this? Like, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's hit the last one. So we've talked about reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and the fourth one is expect a greater reward. Talk about that briefly, and let's talk about some examples.
Shane?
Well, I want you to give us the rundown from
the
Sunday.
overview. Yeah. So I think there's a couple rewards. There's the tangible reward of today in this life, and there's the eternal reward that Jesus talked about all the time. And where he's like, "Hey, store up treasure in heaven," where he talked about, and you will be rewarded like for the things that are so hard and require an enormous amount of courage, and maybe no one will never know. God knows, and He's going to reward you. So there's an eternal reward that's really motivating. In eternity in heaven. And then there's this really tangible reward you can receive. And it's at multiple levels. I think the reward of healthy quality relationships, and quality of life is all so determined by the quality of your relationships. If you step up into these grids and what God's called you to do, you can begin to experience a deeper level of trust. There's a great reward there. There's reward in terms of your legacy as a man. I think there's so many decisions I've made outside of this grid that have hurt my legacy. But there's the reward of being able, as an old man, rocking on the porch, I always use this, sipping whatever, and being able to look in the eyes of my wife and see satisfaction to see a woman discovered and loved, to be able to look in the eyes of my sons and say my father admitted his mistakes over and over. He owned his mistakes. He asked for forgiveness, but he was there, and his voice of wisdom was there when I was young. His voice of wisdom was there when I was getting older and having kids and, getting older in my marriage. And how do you do this? That legacy component of a man, which is so rewarding. And then just the personal reward, I think it's to look at yourself in the mirror and be able to, just have this freedom to breathe, not have the energy to compete with all the secrets behind, kind of your heart or behind your mind, to go, all the things that I've crossed these lines, all the things that I've done. There's such freedom to go, man, today was a hell of a day. I worked hard. I trusted God. He empowered me to make these decisions, to be courageous. There's such a rewarding, freeing, authentic, genuine feeling you get to go, wow, that's rewarding. It's so good. It's similar like if you work out. And it's like hard. Like for me, I hate working out. Every time I work out, it sucks. I never feel the runner's high. I've never once felt that. But at the end of it, I can take a shower, put on my shirt, do all those things. And there's a sense, it's a small little, deposit of it. But there's a sense of going, wow, that feels good.
Yeah.
Feels good.
As long as you
Feels
don't
freeing.
injure yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And then I do walk off and I'm like, man, that all hurts. But that is so rewarding individually, relationally, eternally. It's rewarding in your legacy. So there's lots of aspects of a reward.
Yeah. Norcross?
Yeah, I think Buck hit it right on the mark regarding legacy. Just thinking about what do I want to be known for, and what do I want my kids and people to say when I'm no longer around? Like, what do I want written on my tombstone is something I think about all the time. As morbid as that may sound, and what do I want people to say at my funeral? But the legacy I leave, like, that is a great reward that I'm excited about. But at this same time too, like, our time on earth is so short when you compare it to what's to come. I love Francis Chan's rope illustration that he does when he takes out this really long rope on stage, and he compares like the time that we spend on earth compared to all of eternity. Like, it is so small. And so I think the more that we can understand eternity in light of today, it will make us want to live for tomorrow and for those greater rewards that are to come, because it's so short and it's so fast and it's over before we know it. And so not just when we're sipping or on our back porch, sipping whatever we're sipping, thinking about our legacy, but spending all of eternity with our Heavenly Father, looking back on the life we've lived. That to me is something I'm excited about, something I'm looking forward to, and it helps me to just lead courageously and think about the reward that I get to expect one day.
Yeah. And I'll go ahead and interject a pastor comment here. I think one of the reasons I love Christianity,
there you go.
There it is because of that greater reward. Knowing that there is something on the other side, and knowing that through suffering, through pain, anything we go through the days when we want to embrace passivity, rejecting passivity, there is a reward, and there is an eternal reward, and that's something that is so life-giving as a man. To be able to find the courage in those moments and go, okay, and again, not always, but when we can, knowing that reward is there is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the most practical things about a reward is rewards motivate. And so you go to work, you get in your car, you dress up, you punch the computer, whatever you do for work, and you do that because you know the reward's coming. So there's a lot of activity behind reward. And, one of the things early on in counseling is my counselor said, Buck, what you're about to go forward with, like what you're about to do, it's going to be the hardest thing I think you've ever done. And we're going to have to go back in order for you to go forward and feel freedom as a man. So you need to start before this conversation begins, before we begin meeting, and write down the motivators. Write down your rewards. Why are you going to do this? What is motivating you? And I think, having clarity on those rewards, this is the kind of legacy I want as a man. Here's what I'd love to see in my family. Here's what I'd love to say about my marriage. Here's what I'd love Jill to say. Here's what I'd love to say about my relationship with my Heavenly Father. Here's what I'd love to say about being a pastor. Those are the motivators. And I've shared those with a few close friends of mine, that when I feel like in the pit, when I feel in the valley, when I feel like giving up, when I feel like walking away, when I feel like it's too hard, too much, one of the beauties is they remind me of these rewards, and those rewards are like centering things. They recenter me. They get me back up and say, okay, that's what, it's motivating, and it helps me have the courage. It helps me step in. It helps me reject those feelings of passivity. It's keeping my eye on the prize, keeping my eye on, those rewards.
Yep.
Yeah, it helps with perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing that, like, our Heavenly Father is cheering us on. He's our biggest fan. Like, he's in our corner. And, one day we get to look forward to the day he says, well done, good and faithful servant, even though, like, I don't have to be perfect. Jesus was perfect for me.
Yeah. Some resources come to mind as I think about, like, what it looks like to identify those rewards. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We've talked about it a lot, but man, just the whole idea, the whole exercise he does of starting with the end in mind. I mean, you write your own eulogy, what you want people to say about you. Like, that is so clarifying. Jeff Henderson, I think in the book called Know What You're For, he talks about just writing the answers to 2 questions. What do you want to be known for? And what are you known for? And what's the gap between those 2 answers? And that one's great too. I think that's a great next step for somebody who's going, what is the greater reward? Well, what do you want to be known for? And what are you known for now? And that's really clarifying and helpful. And we've kind of maxed out our time here, but this has been a great discussion. I want to ask one more thing, and that is that if there are men or really anybody listening to this and going, okay, what do I do with these? How can I grow in these areas? What can I do? What would y'all say? Like, stuff we have here at North Point to partner with men. How would you guys just kind of encourage them to take a step?
Call Buck.
His phone number is
call Shane.
Yeah.
I mean, in all seriousness, like, seriously, give me a call. I don't care if you shoot my phone number, email address out there. You can reach me at shane.norcross@npaustin.com. Like, I want every man to be connected to other men who will cheer them on, encourage them, pray for them, support them, help them. God designed us for relationships not only with him, but with other dudes, and we need other dudes. And so if there's men that are listening to this saying, hey, where do I start? Like, get in a group with men who want to do the same thing that you do as far as being a man and trying to pursue these 4 things. Don't try to do it on your own. Reach out to me. I'll help you get into a group.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say definitely that. And then I personally would just say, write them down. Write these 4 things down. Put them in a place that are super memorable. Memorize them, like, for real. Own it. And then invite God like no tomorrow into it. And I think just an awareness, the ability to look in the mirror every single morning and go, man, I am a strong, powerful man. Like, God's given me everything I need. And regardless of what you alluded to at the very beginning of, like, if you're more creative, if you're, the manly man with a mustache, if, whatever.
Why do manly men have to have mustaches?
Yeah, I wouldn't even go manly man has a mustache. But God is a God of diversity. God has created us all in different flavors, and when we all come together and we work together, it's something beautiful. And the beauty is, if you know this definition, if you've written it down, if you remind yourself of it, you can look at yourself every morning and just say, man, God has made me a man. I am a strong, powerful man, and God, you've given me everything I need for life today. And so, when you face it, when you feel it, you know what it is now.
And remember that regardless of how well you did these 4 things, they do not define you. Yep. You are not defined by how well you live these out.
Yep. To reiterate the 4 things, just for anybody who is going, I got to write those down, I got to memorize them. It is...
Are you asking us, or are you going to tell us?
Yeah, I'm asking you guys.
Yeah.
Reject passivity.
Yep.
Accept responsibility. Lead courageously. And Buck, the 4th one?
Expect a great reward.
Good stuff, y'all. Thanks so much for being on the podcast,
Yeah.
talking through it.
Thank you, guys.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for listening, and we'll see you this Sunday.
Giddy up.
Yep.